Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending the Trail Talks tonight. I'm Ahmad Mirza. I'm a librarian here with the Santa Barbara Public Library. Before we begin, just to make the normal announcements we make here. If you register for the event on the library's calendar, you should get an email with the webinar information. If you're placed on the wait list, we will then send you a link on the day of the event. So if you see that the event is full, just reach out to us or register for the event, of course. And even if you're on the wait list, we'll be able to get the links to you. And definitely email and reach out to us if you're having any issues getting that information. We wanted to also send a big thank you out to James Wapatich, who is our library partner for these Trail Talk series. If you remember, James gave a book to action talk last week on the Channel Islands, which was a really, really, really great presentation, a talk, if you will. And that's actually on our library's YouTube page right now. You could see it, access it if you missed it. So big shout out to you, James, if you're watching. And if anyone's interested in following James's adventures, James does have a blog, and that's www.songsofthewilderness.com. So shout out to you, James, for that. We have a treat for next month. Also, it's always a treat when we get a Trail Talks on the calendar. For next month, we have it. So mark your calendars, everybody. July 21st, 5:30, same time, same place. That is going to be the Trail Talks is called Tahoe Rim Trail Overview. So I'm assuming it's the whole circle around the lake there, and sustainable trail use. And that is going to be with Morgan Steele and Tommy Rosenbluth. That's a little bit of some NorCal action there for us down here. So we're excited for some Trail Talks about Tahoe. We may be doing a little thing, some things a little bit differently tonight with the Trail Talks. Normally we ask you send us your questions, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the presentation. But for tonight, if you have a question, pop it into the chat. If it's, especially because if it's on something that you see that's on a slide, we'll hop in there and ask it to Ray here while he's doing the presentation. So that's a little different than how we do things normally, and then what questions we don't get to during, we'll try to get to at the end if there is time. Shift in some gears here. Okay, sweet, got through all that. So tonight, I want to introduce our speaker this evening, Ray Ford. Ray has more than a decade of experience designing, rehabilitating, and repairing trails in the Santa Barbara area, and has coordinated and led trail projects for the Santa Barbara Trails Council and Los Padres Forest Association. Ray is also author of numerous, we were talking about it earlier, numerous books on maps and hikings, backpacking, mountain biking in the Santa Barbara area, including, and these are titles here, Santa Barbara Day Hikes, Trails of the San Rafael Wilderness, Santa Barbara Mountain Biking, Santa Barbara Road Rides, Santa Barbara Wildfires, and the recently revised Santa Barbara Front Country Trail Map. Ray is also the outdoors writer for Newshawk. And you need to definitely, if you haven't done so right now, bookmark this website. Here's Ray's website here. It's www.sboutdoors.com. Once again, that's www.sboutdoors.com. It's a great resource and a great tool. I was poking around in there earlier, get some questions about it, Ray, during the Q&A here. And for tonight's, the talk tonight, it's in the next few years, Santa Barbara County will be completing a trails master plan that could call for new trail access. Currently, the county is inventorying current trail access and analyzing new potential routes. So this talk will provide an in-depth look at what we have, where new trails might be added, and how this might occur. And with that, Ray, thank you so much. I'm pass you the floor here.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thanks for all of you who've come here tonight. I appreciate that. What we're really going to look at a little bit is where we're heading in the future. I think most of the people are probably online know a lot about trails in Santa Barbara, but what we really want to look at is how we build something that's more than what we have. And what we have now is a whole series of agencies and groups and individual people that are all part of trails in their own different ways, whether that's Forest Service, Bureau of Reclamation, county parks, the cities, and so forth. But we don't really have an overview management system that provides a real long-term sustainable plan for how we manage trails in Santa Barbara County. And for a long time, that's not been a real problem, just because the numbers weren't high, but the popularity of the trails, whether it's COVID or otherwise, is increasing exponentially. And we really need to understand the resources, and fires, floods, and so forth are also creating some pretty serious problems for maintaining them. So what we really need to look at is how we build something. And I've said building a comprehensive trails plan for Santa Barbara County. But reality, it's actually building a recreation master plan. I just want to look and focus on trails. I highlight a few things here and there, but this could be the most consequential thing the county has ever done to support trails in a recent history. And I've heard that from several people in different ways and kind of paraphrase that. I'm not sure exactly how consequential it will be, but we're really at a turning point in terms of how we look at trails from a countywide perspective. Still want to emphasize that we're in the middle of a process and there are an awfully lot of unknowns. So talking to Erica Leachman, who's the principal planner at Wood Environmental, about the plan today, she says we still have a lot to learn ourselves, and there will be more meetings and get-togethers for people to be involved with that. So we are in the midstream. Most importantly, though, this is something that is happening now because of the vision that 3rd District Supervisor Joan Hartman had. And in that concept, in one of our first meetings we had, and we talked about some of these concepts. These are the 3 things that I took from her that were important to her, and why it was important to do something like put together a larger plan. Healthy communities, healthy trails, healthy people, being active, being outdoors, and what role the county plays are all important parts of where we're heading, I think, in the future. This is what the county is showing as what the recreation master plan is. And if you look at it, it's not just about trails, it's about parks and all forms of recreation. A lot of that will be in cities. Some of that will be in the unincorporated areas. And the process is starting with, the first, I guess, aspect of that was surveying everything we've got. And that's anything from playground swings to water fountains at the very most detailed level, to where are the trails, where are the different kinds of things that people are using currently. We've just gotten into the phase where it's how do we find out what is missing, and if you look at trails, for instance, what's missing is a whole bunch. And you can look at that from the perspective just of something like the California Coastal Trail, where it's been very difficult to piece together, the parts of it that will create a trail that goes from Goleta to the Gaviota Coast at its best, and maybe throughout the entire county. So what Erica said, that this is kind of phase 1, is really about public improvements, getting an understanding of what we have, what we need, and then building a plan for improving those things. What I'm seeing in this process are what I've called 3 key issues, and they're about land use policies, and funding. And just to think about those a little bit. So access to land. I'm sure any of you that have ridden a bike out in the San Ynez Valley or around, and you've dreamed about what it would be like to have a trail that just meandered through some of those foothills on up to Figueroa Mountain or other places, knows that feeling that there's so many places out there, so much open space that could make for incredible experiences, but they're on private land. And for the most part, is the third point I put down, is historically ranchers have not really been welcoming, to public access on their lands. And the other part of that too is where the land is that is potential for, conversion in places into trails and other kinds of recreational things, is currently zoned as ag. And ag 1 is the smaller kind of stuff. You go through the San Ynez Valley and you're out on a bike ride through, the rural parts of the towns there, and you're seeing 5 and 10 acre lots. Those are ag 1 type lots. Ag 2 is the kind that's in the 40 to 100, or more, could be thousands of acres land. They're the large pieces, and ag 2 is where the focus is right now. Land use policies, that's the second key thing. So if you look at land use, the land use development code, on ag property currently, an oil well is an acceptable use and a trail is not. The amount of effort we had to go when we built the Barone Ranch Trail through to get the agricultural community to buy into the trail at Barone was difficult. It probably postponed, getting it open by, a year in just the meetings and so forth with the ag, commission and so forth to get those kind of approvals. So zoning ordinances have not been friendly to trails when it comes to the agricultural areas and the open spaces. Their zoning ordinances similarly, trail use is not, there's no zoning for trail use anywhere in the county. And the last of those, which is probably the long-term issue that I think nobody's really talking about too much because they want to move these things ahead, is, whether it's Santa Barbara City, whether it's the county, or none of the agencies. I mean, the Forest Service can't fund, trail, maintenance or trail care. The agencies don't have a budget for trails, let alone looking at new trails that might come into the system. And none of them have trail crews, professional people that are capable of doing things. And almost all of the county-wide work that's being done, whether that's the Trail Council or LPFA or Montessori Trails Foundation or SAGE, almost everything is cared for by nonprofits. And that's a serious concern on my end, just because nonprofit groups have their own purposes, and they have been a key, and I've been involved in many of them, so I can see that, a key in the care of trails in Santa Barbara. But that's really, properly the area that the agency should be involved with. So for the life of me, I can't figure out how any agency has trails and yet won't budget for them. So what we're really going to spend a lot of time looking at is things that relate to ag, because ag is where the land is, and ag is where the potential for somehow working out relationships where we get win-win situations. And the basically, if you look at the block at the bottom, is ranchers in Santa Barbara County are finding that ranching alone is not as profitable as it needs to be for them to maintain their operations. So they're looking for other ways to earn money. It could be in a ranch being able to have a small overnight private camp. It could be food that goes along with that, and it can be a winery that wants to serve food. Whatever the things are, there are things that ag in these the northern parts of the county are starting to realize that they need, and there may be potentials of working with them to see if it can also be solutions for trail and recreation as well. There's 2 ordinances that have been gradually being brought to the forefront. One's called Farm Stay, and that came up in the Gaviota Coast planning process, where they wanted to include the ability to have small level types of things. And then ag in general in the county wanted to look at some of the ways of being able to do some of this stuff. Farm stay is, we can have possibly a small, maybe 15 guests, maybe 1 to 2 or 3 structures, and we can have parties and events and activities and things like that, and we can serve food. And that came up in the Gaviota plan. It's been subsequently been wrapped into the Agricultural Enterprise Ordinance that's being developed now. So these are both concepts that are starting to look at how farming and ranching in the county can start bringing in essence, recreation into their properties. Because if you're going to have overnight guests, that could mean horseback rides, it could mean hiking trails, and could mean educational things and so forth. So all of a sudden, they're starting to look at ways that they can profit by creating more recreational opportunities. And the Ag Enterprise Ordinance was designed subsequently to really deal with the larger properties and throughout the entire county. And it has a concept, which is really applicable to trails, but it's called tiered permitting, where by the intensity of the use, let's say you wanted to have a campground, instead of it being 15, you wanted to have a limit of 30, or you wanted to have 45 or something like that, whatever the numbers are. Tiered meaning that the more intense the activity or the use, then the more requirements might be put on you, or possibly the more things might be allowed for you. In some cases, things might be actually streamlined to allow them to be done without even having permitting. The concept here that they developed is really kind of serves as a model for what are called public benefits projects. And that's the kind of the concept that's behind how we're going to bring recreation into and trails into this open space area that's always been private. And it's starting to look at the idea of how can we change the zoning policies? How can we change the land use policies so that recreation and trails have standing in them and would be allowed in certain cases to work with the ranches to actually bring new trails, public access, not just private things that they have on their ranch, like say, for instance, an RV camp or something like that, would be probably private and profitable. So that wouldn't be a public access thing in that sense. But a trail along the river from Buellton to Solvang might be something that would be. And what are the things we can exchange? And so looking at the concept of public benefit projects is, first of all, if you've added things to the land use code that allow for trails, probably maybe fruit stands along the way, different kinds of things that might be beneficial to trails, you put those in that land use code, and then you start looking at how you create a tiered system where the more that the private owner wants, the more public benefits you get. So it's kind of taking that ag enterprise concept and taking it over into this. The only difference here is that in an ag enterprise system, they're looking at what benefits them. In the concept of public benefits, the county would then be looking at what benefits the public and and what the trade-offs are. So if the system eventually gets done, they do not have a definition of what a public benefit project is now. So this is all stuff that has to be worked out. What kind of benefits are we talking about? If they did an environmental restoration project on their property, would that be a public benefit? It wouldn't necessarily benefit trails, but we're obviously thinking about where can we get trails and get them on places that we want to go. So we're thinking trails. That's not necessarily what everybody would be thinking about. But the basic concept would be to look and see if an ag owner wants something, is that permitted on his land, under the new zoning and land use policies? And then does it meet the requirements of the public benefit project, which we don't know what that is yet. And then they can approve that and include, easements or other benefits in that process. So here's kind of things that were mentioned. I noted that this is from the first public workshop that was done by Wood Environmental on the Ag Enterprise Ordinance discussions. I'm sure these things have changed, but bottom line is the ranchers get a few things, and here are some of the things that they initially identified as things that they could do there. And again, it wasn't focused on trails, it was focused on economic viability for the ranchers. And the key concept was it had to be incidental to their actual ranching. In other words, it's not to replace ranching. The public benefits concept would, in some cases, maybe replace the ranching. For instance, if a property was turned over completely into an RV park and the rest of it was given over as public access areas for, say, a bike park, that could easily be something where it could fit into that concept. And it's gonna be interesting to see how this all works out, there too. But basically right now is that it's probably its key thing is that access to new trail opportunities. And I think as the new workshops and so forth come up, it's going to be incumbent to go to those meetings and express what you want to see happen, because that's where things kind of get shaped. So I want to just, take a little bit of a look through the county in general. If we had a blank map and we were building something, just look at when we're starting to think of a master plan process. Well, first of all, a lot of the recreation is probably going to be near where the cities are, there. And you notice that they're spread out. You notice that they kind of follow an arc that's closer to the coast, as they go from east to west and north. And they're the ones that are looking for probably a really high emphasis on what recreational needs they have. And they're going to be different than what some of us probably might want to have. We start looking at the county, we start to realize that in actuality, it's a pretty intensely mountainous country. We've got two main watersheds, neither of them that end up anywhere near Santa Barbara. And they're separated only by one long mountain range system, the San Rafael Mountains, from over by the Fox and Canyon area all the way over, into the Dick Smith area. And start to notice that, okay, if we're starting to talk about recreational opportunities, these are the major roads in Santa Barbara. Notice that they pretty much follow where the cities are, and they skirt almost all of the mountainous areas. So there's all of these open space areas potentially out there. And of course, we start to look at where all of the local roads are, and you see that they're predominantly overlaid on the cities. And you start to see up in the northern part of the county along the Cuyama River area, there are a few roads that get you up into the interior, but the reality is most of the population and most of what the recreational needs for the majority of people is probably going to be following where the roads are, where the cities are. You add where all of the trails are and where the parks are, and you notice that the eastern part and a lot of them are towards the coastal area there. And a lot of this is just, simply historically, that's where people were. The evolution of Santa Barbara and its growing population until there was a connection, through to the North County, there was a real separation, and a lot of the population and wanting access to the interior was out of the Santa Barbara area. But if you look at the North County, the Orchid trails, hardly even see them there because it's not a mass. You've got Las Flores trails. There are a few things. There's some things out at Point Sol. And you've got Midland trails out there too. There is very, very little in the way of trails anywhere in the north and west, western parts. A lot of that is just because, again, it's private ranching lands. And then you start to realize too that a lot of that actually, in the Santa Barbara areas, we have a wilderness area, or a series of wilderness areas. We've got a huge amount of the forest, that's there. And you start to look at these overlays of things. It's topography, it's where water's flowing, it's where cities are located, and it's the overlap of agencies. So you have the cities, you've got Vandenberg, which is just kind of a fixture there. Not much that we can do with that. And you've got all of this. So it's just going to be interesting to see how we can mishmash all of this with these different overlaying agencies and actually put together a trail system. But what you realize when you look at this, a huge block of white. That's the, more or less the unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County. There's a huge amount in the center, and you've got a swath of it along the Cuyama River, and the rest of it somebody else manages. It's going to be interesting to see how you deal with land use policies and so forth. I was talking about farm stay and ag enterprise, those are county ordinances, and it's going to be interesting to see how cities like Santa Maria, or Lompoc, which are more of the rural, types of areas, interact, with the county and trying to create policies that work for everybody there. And then there's, by looking at population now, when I was at UCSB, I played baseball, and I played summers, some with the Santa Maria Indians, and the farmers would come and bring things. Santa Maria was a cow town in the 1960s, and it now is the leading population center in Santa Barbara County. And the population differences, if you look at the bottom there, Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, I didn't put Carp in there, 123,000 people, I think a couple years ago, and 154,000 in Santa Maria and Lompoc. So we've got all the recreational opportunities where, they're in what I call my territory, which is the eastern and southern part of the county. And yet the population is mostly now starting to trend towards the northern part of the county, and they have the least amount of resources. So there's a lot of things when you're talking about managing plans that we've got to deal with. There are a lot of things that we need to do for the South County, but the North County, it's not a matter of, the South County, we need resources so we can manage trails and rehabilitate them. They got to get them in the first place. One of the thoughts in building this rec master plan as it relates to ag, enterprise, and the recreational public benefits thing is, how do we determine the areas that we're going to create these for? And it's not something that they're looking at doing for the entire county. And part of that is just it's ridiculously expensive to try and do this all up front. But the more important thing is, where this policy of public benefit projects is probably going to work best is places where there's open space, ranch lands, that are large. And so it kind of coincides with the issue that this part of the county also doesn't have a lot of trails in the first place. So everything that's in orange here is theoretically what could be a corridor. They're basically the roads, whether it's Fox and Canyon, Highway 135, 246, Santa Rosa Road, and so forth. All of those potentially have open space areas. Some of those are wineries, some of them are ranching opportunities. They may all need some kind of opportunity, to improve their economic viability. And so this may tie in very easily to some of this. And this is a little bit closer look at some of those areas. This is looking at, what I just call it the West County, but it's the Hollister Ranch, and then you've got the Nature Conservancy, which I didn't put in there, own a huge chunk of the property down there and create certain things. But there's a lot of ranching in Halama along the Santa Rosa Road. The concept we're going to look at that I've gotten kind of a blue block there is creating a river trail corridor. Wouldn't it be nice if we could start looking at how to follow that? And I forgot to put the Santa Ynez River on there, so just kind of pretend there's one in there between Santa Rosa Road and 246. But Wouldn't it be nice if there was a river trail that went all the way to Buellton? Or excuse me, all the way to Lompoc? We already wanted to go to Buellton. And this is the areas we're looking at here. This is a good example of what we might look at if we're coming up with the concept. You got two green dots. You've got a dot over on Santa Rosa Road. You've got a dot where you cross the river and you're kind of right at looking across the road at Alisal Ranch. How do you get from one to the other? And how do you do it so that you can have a beautiful bike path that people can commute to work from Buellton if they're coming to Solvang, or vice versa? But you've got a number of properties here that are in the middle. Well, what can we do, to deal with those? So here's some of the properties. The one on the far left or west is they want to have some kind of RV resort over towards Santa Rosa Road, on that part of the property. The pink and the blue is a property that wants to develop. They've already got a permit for a zip line. They have other ideas about what they would like to do. The pink or salmon is granite construction. And then the yellow is a woman that owns a horse. I think they have stables type thing there. And then the last one on the far right is Alisal Ranch. So you've got a number of properties here. They all have different interests, but they all may want something that could be termed a public benefit project, and they all may want something that the new codes will allow them to do. And that's when you get into trade-offs. So I think this is Joan Hartman's pet project. There's a lot of details going on with it, but this is an example of something that could become a reality because of the development of some of these concepts here. This is the best I could do, but looking at it. But this is where, this is the road here is what basically, if you followed it, turned around, followed it the other way, would be right along a levee. That would be a perfect opportunity. Goes under the road here on 101, and then it would connect to Santa Rosa Road there. And I just threw in, here's some concepts. This is not anything somebody's proposing, but here's a few different ways that you might look at developing a trail system, either higher or lower and so forth, depending on what the owners are willing to trade for other kinds of uses. So these are possibilities that are now there that we didn't have before. Now, also, Fox and Canyon is another one that people look at as a possibility. All these dots, and this is an old wine map that I did a while ago, so I'm sure there's new wineries and maybe half of them got bought out by somebody by now too. But every one of those dots is either a winery, or a vineyard. And you notice that if you go down Buellton, and Los Olivos, for instance, have a whole bunch of dots over them because they've got a lot of tasting spots. But then you go out Fox and Canyon, you'll see a number of different dots along the way. So that's an area where you could start looking at working with some of the wineries out there. This is where they could have the ability to have food. Theoretically, I suppose they could do some lodging so that people, that are doing a wine trail kind of experience can actually stay at one of the wineries. That might be a possibility. And you notice that there's an awfully lot of wineries out there on the Fox and Canyon Wine Trail. And again, this is an old sign, so I'm guessing there's probably more now. And Fox and Canyon, it could be amenable. There, you've got access. That currently, right now, there is road access right of ways. They, for the most part, on the left, for instance, that's a drainage ditch. Probably would be difficult to build a trail over there. Little narrow on the other side. My concept is, what if we could get them, to move that fence line out, to the left or to the right, and create a trail that's much further off the roadway, not just one of the DG or paved roads that goes right along the roadway, because this is a beautiful rural road. You don't really want to see it developed any more than that. But if you had a trail, that was 50 feet off that people could use, and at the same time really didn't change the nature of the road, that's the kind of thing that, that was a Dominion Canyon there. I actually hit the button twice. This is the kind of thing that's happening at places like Las Flores. So starting to look at parts of people's properties where they're amenable to building trails networks. Some of those could be smaller for bike parks or other kinds of activities. It's an open, field for looking at all the different kind of possibilities that could be out there. Another one in looking at corridors, when I built the Orchid Hills trail system, we were definitely looking at how we could connect from Orchid Hills across, and again, the green dots, how do you get from one to the other? Right where the dot on down by Las Flores is, there's a little triangular piece of property, and that's private. Then the huge chunk that's right in the middle is oil company property. And then there's smaller pieces along the way, there. This is a map that I did for Santa Maria Valley Open Spaces a number of years ago, just a simple map, but I wanted to show what the properties were, there. So my understanding now is the open space group in Santa Maria has gotten some agreements with some of the private property owners to be able to get into some of these areas that they hadn't when I was spending time there. But here's just a look at, we know what the properties are now. We know that there's something coming. What can we do to make this happen? And I think people are also starting to talk about how we can take the Orchid Hills and go west out to Point Sol. Others are looking at Las Flores and saying, how can we get out Dominion Road and some other places to Fox and Canyon? Here's a map that shows Fox and Canyon in green. So you just get a concept look at it. And you look at Alisos Canyon, for instance, just there's two huge properties that basically you can go from Highway 101, if you go a little bit below the orange road for Aliso Canyon, which I put as a corridor. There's two properties that would get you from Fox and Canyon to 154. That's interesting, when you look at something like, not 154 to Fox and Canyon. And then I started looking at how we can maybe make connections to some of the trails I built at Midland School over here too. And you got this big chunk just to the left of Midland School, which is the old Neverland ranch. And then you've got a couple of others that get you out into the Fox and Canyon area. There are tremendous opportunities to start looking at how you can create things. And this one intrigued me up here. I put in a blue square that this is along Fox and Canyon. It's a little bit of what the territory looked like out there. You can just picture what trails could look like if you had access to some of these properties here. And lo and behold, there is one piece of property. It's not along the road here, but it's actually for sale at $5.9 million. And it's the kind of thing, if you had a long-term, and complex, operating, open space district or area, you might be able to start looking at properties like this. It's up this canyon right here. It takes you up. This canyon is called Schoolhouse Canyon. And it's actually not too far away from where the Zaka fire started many years ago. And it backs up to the San Rafael Wilderness. And that's the property up there. It's 1,470 acres of property. I'm thinking that you could probably create a beautiful bike park or something like that up in there and have it in a situated area where it's all on its own. But it's the kind of thing that might become available in the future as we develop some of the concepts and potentially some kind of more defined open space district is developed. So anyway, just a few last thoughts on looking at some of that stuff, but managing things for the long term as in the form of a master plan and some kind of operating agency is an absolute necessity. We have too many people and too many needs, and recreation is too critical to the lives of huge numbers of people not to be a key. And a recreational master plan is key to overseeing a lot of that kind of stuff. And I want to say that we also have to start rethinking about how we manage some of those resources. We have a parks department, and that parks department does a really, really, really good job of managing what its basic mission is, which is a more urban parks kind of system. And we need to start rethinking about how we develop something that is more of an open space district that includes education. It includes land restoration. It includes trails, recreation, and so forth. And it has a funding mechanism that will make it possible. Now, I've got a good friend that works for the Jefferson County Open Space District in Golden, Colorado, and they have a beautiful, beautiful open space district. And it's been operating since 1972 under a 1/2 cent sales tax that goes to the district. And it's been done every year since then. They share that they collect everything. I mean, cities as well as the unincorporated areas. And then they give back 50% of what was collected in each of those cities within the county. And then they take the other 50% and build a master planning process for themselves. That's the kind of thinking I think we need to be able to start thinking about reasonably soon. And then one of the last things really is funding. And I'm going to say it, think unintended consequences. What I'm thinking of is all of a sudden we start getting new trails built into the system. Well, those trails need to be maintained and taken care of. And all of a sudden you have parks that's tied more to parks that are tied more to the urban areas that are now starting to see the need to manage things that are all over the county. So we need to start thinking about what the impacts will be and how we're going to manage and fund those kind of resources. Now, this is Scott from the Jefferson County Open Space District, and I took him up to Barone Ranch. This is both after the fire, after the first round of rain, and then we had one night of more intensive rain that created a lot of destruction in the Barone Ranch area. The kind of stuff that's difficult to do easily. This is the kind of stuff that something like county parks in its current form really doesn't have the ability to deal with. I mean, it's just, as I mentioned before, for the most part, trails are not funded. And when things like this happen, for the most part, it's difficult to deal with taking care of them. And this is, some of the upper part of the loop trail. If any of you have gone up and done the lower part of the loop, not the ridge trail itself. And roads on both sides of the trail there that were seriously damaged. So one of the things that I think an open space district can do is to provide, the kind of oversight and trail crew construction and resource capabilities, land management capabilities that can help handle these things in the more rural areas. I think that's a really important concept. And I would also say that this is an example of something that there is a trail organization that was responsible for managing some of this, and they chose not to do it. This is a look at the open space part of the Jefferson County, Colorado website. I put the link there. If you go to jeffco.us, it will get you to eventually, that's their county government. The 814, I guess, is the open space department or something like that. But this is what their page looks like. They have parks and trails. They have resource groups. They have trail groups. They do a lot of this stuff in-house. This is from their website. Here are the trails in their system. They have 280 miles of trails. This area called Matthews Winter Park is a beautiful place. I've done a couple trips with Scott out. The one on the right that's kind of long and skinny is that ridge. Interestingly enough, on the west down where it's green is the Rocks Amphitheater, this beautiful place for concerts. On the right, where there's a little green strip, there's a major national drag strip there. So all this stuff is kind of squeezed into this area, but these are all places that they were able piece by piece to bring together over, decades of time and bring into their system because they had funding to be able to do things like this over time. And it's beautiful territory for both mountain biking, hiking, simple, easy access. That if you look at their trail planning stuff, they're looking at the concept of where can we get things that are within 10 minutes of walking and 10 minutes of driving. So 10 minutes of walking, here's a place where you get right off the freeway. There you got the parking trailhead and you go out and hike or bike ride. Down in the bottom right of this ridge stuff, they just finished doing a section of trail. There's a pretty technical mountain biking section that's set up for mountain bikes only. So I want to say a last few kind of things. This is, and I want to salute a good friend. His name's Kalon Kelly. This is he and I up on the ridge at Barone. This is about 2009, and we've scrambled our way up. We're looking for a route that we can build a trail up to the crest. And to a certain extent, this is a lot of the way we ended up doing it. Hey, Kalon carried a little thing to record stuff all the time, and I'm just sitting there going, I can't even get under that, let alone be carrying stuff too. And then he was out there when we built the upper part of the loop trail. He was out there with the hammer drill, splitting rocks, joining me with me while this is my old excavator, where we were moving things so we could finish this up, so we could open up Barone in 2011 as the first real new trail system in the Barone, in the Gaviota Coast area. And then finally we got through the point of going through building the preliminary line, doing the environmental impact work, and actually starting to build the trail. And this is my newer excavator, the one I still use now, that we're up on the Barone Ranch Trail. It is the single most beautiful place up there anywhere. The upper part of the Franklin Trail is equal, but this is spectacular. On a clear day, you can see the sand at Devereaux Point, and the islands are crystal clear up there. And that's it. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Ray.
Sure.
So it's like get some questions here. We got one here from James. Are there any new trails currently in the works, something that might become a reality in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm not thinking of anything right now, but I have to think about that a little bit. But there aren't a whole lot of opportunities, to build new trails. That would be short term, because a lot of it. One of the aspects of dealing with trails is that through the community planning process, there is, I should say, what's called a PRT map. It's Parks and Recreation Trail Maps, and that defines basically corridors where if the owner decides that he wants to develop, a trail might go through. Just to give you an example, on the Franklin Trail, when the effort was started was in the 1980s. The trail wasn't built till about 2015. So that just is the length of time to where it took to go through all of the people that wanted something and were willing to give in the old style, process. So it's not an easy thing to get a new trail into the system just because of the private property issue. And I'm hoping that will change. Well, I'm not thinking of any just immediately.
It's all right. And then we got another question here. It says, bringing things into our territory, any thoughts on prospects to address the lack of trails from Goleta into, I think that's Los Padres National Forest?
Yeah, it's interesting that I just talked to the lawyer at one of the meetings on this whole master plan process. It was just at the Botanic Garden, and God, I'm forgetting his name right now, but anyways, he's the attorney for the owner of the property, the primary property that is basically between Glen Annie and Los Carneros. And it's that from 101, as you drive by between Glen Annie and Los Carneros, you see that open space area. That's the attorney's property. If you go on, you're on Hollister, same type, and you look up and you see all the orchards, that's also the same property. It goes about 2/3 of the way up to the top of the mountains. They've wanted to build on that lower part for many, many years, and they're willing to give a trail on pretty much anything above Hollister, above Cathedral Oaks there. Interesting enough, that lower parcel is in the city of Goleta, the upper parcel is in the county. So, and the Goleta City has no interest in that ever being developed, and it's not zoned for it in their master plan. So there's things like that that make it very, very difficult. We've scouted routes that will get us to the top of the mountain. You just got to get from Cathedral Oaks up through those first, layer of properties. And we did a presentation about 10 years ago when I was the ED for the Trails Council at the Goleta Community Center, and there was ranchers there, and they not over my dead body is basically what they were saying about trails. They were going through those properties, so it's difficult. Now, will there be something on one of those properties there that might? It's called University Exchange is the name of the company that owns all that land there. Will there be something that they'll want that's not the subdivision down below? Hard to know. I mean, they're independently wealthy people out of Chicago, and they don't need it. So I don't know is the answer. None of the properties there's just this band that's you can't really get through.
Yeah, there was a question on any progress up at Lake Cachuma. Do you think they'll allow a public trail system on the newer Nature Conservancy property?
At what did you say, Lake Cachuma?
Yeah, it says Lake Cachuma.
Okay, there's not any Nature Conservancy property there that I know of. I've been working with county parks for the last year and a half on the development of a whole network of trail systems out at Live Oak that would allow for a much larger opportunity, to move people around and out and around and so forth. That area is probably going to undergo some kind of review. It's owned by the Bureau of Reclamation, and it's managed under a management agreement with county parks, for all of the parcels that are on the the north side of the lake and a little bit on the east side of the lake. We're looking at the whole concept of how you can get a trail that goes all the way around, and some of those parts on the far north end or northwest end would require some of those creative possibilities in the public benefit projects to be able to get through. But Live Oak is open to hiking. It's not open to mountain biking right now, and it's open up to equestrians as well. It's been an interesting thing with equestrians not really wanting to share that property. It's 3,000 acres, and currently there's about 10 miles or 11 miles of roads that are available. There's more that could be available, but it really requires an environmental impact statement to do that. And I think County Parks has been looking at trying to do something on that front, with Bureau of Reclamation. And I've provided some ideas for how you could add as much as 20 miles of trails out there. So the potential's there. It's a slow process. I think that doesn't require the rec master plan to happen. It really requires the relationship with Bureau of Reclamation Parks, to do that, and then to do what's needed in the environmental side to approve, additional trails. And there are some that would be pretty much opposed to that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
There was I guess the clarification is, do you think they'll allow a public trail system on the newer nature conservancy property at the Point Conception?
Yeah, that's, you go down the Halama Road and it's basically at the lower end of the Halama Road, and then it's to the west towards Point Conception. That's that huge property. They have been resistant to the idea of recreation on it. And it's the group called CRATAC, County Riding and Hiking Trails Committee. That's the official group that works with county parks to deal with trail related issues, is going back and forth, trying to have communications with the people that manage the Nature Conservancy property there. It's interestingly enough that all this stuff that I've been doing here, is on software called ArcGIS, and it's owned by a company called Esri. And the owner of Esri owns that property, and then, turned it over to the Nature Conservancy. So, that's technology meeting, rural areas, buying land, and then their focus is more on the restoration side than it is on the recreational side. We'll see if that changes, but CRATAC's trying to do something about it.
Okay, Ray, I got another one here. Is Barron ready to be opened up yet?
Barone Ranch.
Barone, sorry.
Yeah, Barone Ranch. What I forgot to mention in this whole process of going through some of the slides there is that I am working with county parks to do restoration on the trails. Those areas that I showed in the pictures, to work on those. I'm working with Sage, and I'm hoping that LPFA will join, as well, because they're the ones that have the trail expertise, and build a volunteer coalition. So anybody that might be interested, we primarily work on weekdays, not weekends, but we can put together volunteer projects. But I am planning on spending a lot of time in the near future rebuilding some of those trails out there. And anybody that would like to come out and join me and join some of the other groups that are going to work out there, we could certainly use help. So just, you've got my email there. It's Ray@SB Outdoors if you want to email me and say, hey, I'd be interested in helping out there. But it's open. It's also, the lower canyon up to where there's a creek crossing, and that's the upper loop, and then goes up to the Ridge Trail. From there up is in very bad condition. So yes, you can do it. You got to be careful to be safe. I wouldn't go up there alone. And I would also say, I don't think it's safe for mountain bike or equestrian use at this point. But hopefully we can do something about that.
Sweet.
Ray@sboutdoors.com.
And that's them to reach out to you about volunteering and helping out.
Yeah, this is going to be a collaborative project with county parks, and Sage will be involved, with helping out, and I'm hoping the LPFA will as well.
Sweet. And I wanted to say that when we send the follow-up email with the link to the YouTube, when this is being recorded, so we're going to have it on the YouTube, we'll also share with y'all some links that for more information about. Also, we'll include Ray's email in there, but also various sites, county sites, and things like that. That's was mentioned throughout the presentation here. But out of respect for time today, 6:30 was where we're aiming at to conclude the talks for this evening. Ray, I just want to say I really, really appreciate all your time today and your wonderful presentation. Very informative. These things just don't happen overnight. But there is a lot of planning and a lot of communication and a lot of organizing and a lot of volunteer and passion put into these trails. So it's just an incredible thing. So I just want to say thank you again for your presentation. We really appreciate you, Ray.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.